My name is Elise. I'm 32 years old. And tonight, I'm wearing a navy dress I picked out 3 months ago. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I knew I'd be invisible no matter what I wore. The room is warm, with laughter, champagne, and soft jazz echoing off high ceilings. There are string lights above the terrace and gold place cards at every seat, hand-lettered with flourishes and love. For her, my sister, Ava, it's her engagement party, hosted by my father. In the house I grew up in, though you'd never know it now. All around me, people are clinking glasses, whispering congratulations, toasting to our girl and her future with Greg, the corporate lawyer with generational wealth and an ego that fills the room before he does. I stand near the edge of it all, not quite inside the celebration, but not allowed to leave either, like a ghost who still has unfinished business. I'm smiling, politely. My hands are clasped loosely in front of me, and I nod along when someone recognises me. You're Ava's sister, right? That's what I've become. Not Elise, not daughter, not investor, not founder, just Ava's sister. I spot my father near the piano. He's laughing, the kind of laugh he only ever gave to Ava. And then, almost ceremoniously, he raises his phone, snaps a photo of her and posts it. I already know the caption, proud dad moment. She's always been my star. He's never posted a single photo of me. Not one. Not when I got my MBA on a scholarship. Not when I opened my first consultancy. Not when I saved his company from collapsing during the pandemic, the one he's now planning to sell. To someone he doesn't know is me. I close my eyes for a moment, let the music swell around me, and I remind myself to stay quiet. Because tonight isn't about that. Tonight, I'm just the sister, smiling, polite, quiet. Ava catches my eye and waves me over. She looks radiant, like she always does, like she was born with a spotlight and I was born to hold the wires. Come join us. Lisi, she says, too loud, with that tone that always sounds like kindness but feels like obligation. You're not going to sulk all night, are you? I smile, just enjoying the view. Greg laughs. You consultants are always analysing the room. Huh. I nod. I'm good at that. At reading silence. At noticing what no one says. I look around the table, at the expensive cutlery, the second-to-last bottle of Chateau Margaux from Dad's prized collection, the slideshow of Ava's childhood on loop behind us. Every photo curated, every moment staged, all of us dressed like a magazine spread, all of it perfect, and all of it hollow. I glance toward the far end of the terrace, where an elderly man in a charcoal suit watches from a distance. His hands are clasped behind his back, and his eyes are fixed on my father. He nods when I meet his gaze. Just once. The sale is already in motion. The paperwork was signed yesterday. He's just here to observe. My name's not on anything. Yet. It doesn't need to be. I know who I am. And soon. My father will too. But tonight, I'll let him live in this illusion a little longer. Let him raise his glass to the daughter he always wanted. Let him keep pretending the other one, the one who rebuilt his legacy from the shadows, doesn't exist. It's easier that way. After all, what father wouldn't want to believe the lie, that his favourite child deserved everything she got, and the other one, well, she was just a good girl with a head for numbers. She didn't need attention, or affection, or pride. Only she did, desperately. And now, she doesn't need any of it anymore, because she's about to become the owner of everything he thinks he built. and he'll find out the truth not with a scream, but with a signature. Ava's laughter rings through the room like wind chimes in a storm, delicate, distracting, just loud enough to cover the sound of things breaking underneath. She always did that. Made noise when things got uncomfortable. When tension tightened like a noose, she'd giggle, twirl her hair, change the subject, and the room would follow her. It always followed her. I sip my drink slowly, letting the bitterness of the champagne coat my tongue. I don't really like it, but I like the silence it gives me. Something to do, something to hold. You two used to be so close. I hear someone whisper behind me, "It's Mrs. Carlin, our old neighbour. She's talking to her husband, both of them retired and still far too invested in our family saga. She doesn't know I can hear her, or maybe she does. She helped Ava with her college apps, you know. Elise was always the smart one." Her husband mutters. But Ava was the star. That phrase again. The star. As if being intelligent was a dimmer light. As if brightness only counts if it draws applause. I walk toward the back garden, where the air is cooler and less filled with invisible judgments. There's a stone bench near the koi pond Dad installed when Ava said she liked Japanese gardens. I used to sit here when I was 15, hiding homework in my lap during family barbecues, hoping someone would ask what I was working on. They never did. I sit down and glance back at the house, lit golden, framed in laughter and legacy. A painting I'm not in. My phone buzzes. A message from the man who now represents me. And the silent fund that's been acquiring controlling shares of my father's company, piece by piece over the last 7 months. Everything is finalised. He'll get the notice Monday morning. I stare at the screen, unmoving. Monday. That's 2 days from now. 2 days until my father walks into a boardroom and sees the signatures, sees my name, sees the truth. My fingers tremble slightly, not from fear, not anymore, but from something deeper. The years of erasure, layered like sediment on my bones. I remember the day I came home from college with my first offer. Bain and company. My dad barely looked up from his steak. "That's nice, sweetheart," he said, "but Ava just got offered a modelling gig in Paris. Isn't that amazing?" Every accomplishment I had was swallowed by her shadow. Not maliciously. No, not even cruelly. Just carelessly, loveless in the way a person forgets to water a plant. Not because they want it to die, but because it never seemed important enough to remember. That kind of forgetting runs deep. I was 18 when I learned to stop showing up for applause. 25 when I realised being invisible made me powerful. 32 when I realised power meant I didn't need permission anymore. A movement at the corner of my eye. Dad's silhouette in the doorway. "There you are," he says, stepping out. His voice warm, performative. Hiding from the party just needed air. I reply. He walks over, slowly, with that gentle stiffness he gets when he's about to talk business, but wants it to feel like affection. "You know, I'm glad you're here. Elise." A beat. Even if it's not your scene. I smile tightly. "Funny. It used to be." He chuckles. "Yeah, you were always the quiet one. Calculated, reliable." It sounds like a compliment, but it feels like a dismissal. "She's lucky," he continues, nodding toward the house. "Ava, to have a sister like you." I say nothing. If he knew. If he had any idea that the woman he's dismissing as reliable just bought the entire foundation he stands on. I want to tell him. I want to scream it. But not yet. Because this moment right here is better. when he still thinks he knows the ending. "Thanks, Dad," I say softly. He pats my shoulder like a boss does to a secretary he barely notices, then walks away. And I sit there, champagne glass empty, silence heavy, my entire body a quiet storm. 2 more days, and then I won't need his words. I'll have his silence. And the company. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because I was nervous. Not in the way people usually mean when they say that. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anticipation. It was the kind of still, hard wakefulness that comes after years of forgetting what it feels like to be angry. I lay in my old bedroom, or what used to be mine before Ava converted it into her guest dressing room. Now it smells faintly of peonies and designer perfume. My books are gone. The posters I once taped to the wall are long ripped down. Even the closet has been restocked with Ava's off-season gowns and handbags she'll never wear again. The only thing left of me is a single framed certificate on the side wall. My high school valedictorian award, hung without ceremony, crooked, dusty. Funny how people forget you slowly, 1 item at a time. Around 2 a.m., I got up and went downstairs. The house was dark except for a strip of hallway light leaking out from under my father's office door. I paused at the threshold. I hadn't stepped inside that room in almost a decade. I used to sneak in when I was little, sit at his desk, and pretend I was running the business. I'd shuffle papers, whisper fake meetings to invisible assistants, sign my name in loopy cursive at the bottom of made-up contracts. I thought I was just playing. But, really, I was studying him, mimicking him, worshipping him. Now, I can see the room for what it really is. A cage made of mahogany, power soaked in male ego, old trophies lined up like soldiers, a bookshelf with titles he never finished, a liquor cart with 1 crystal decanter, always half empty, and a single leather chair, the kind that makes you feel small just looking at it. He didn't hear me approach. He was staring at his computer screen, backlit in a dull blue hue, eyes squinting at numbers he no longer understood. The company's been bleeding for months. It's not his fault entirely. The market's changed. Tech left him behind. But it is his fault that he refused help, that he mocked me for suggesting digital reinvestment, that he called my ideas a little too modern and not really our brand. And yet, it was my plan that saved it. My algorithm, my network, my team. He just doesn't know the name behind the rescue was mine. I watched him sigh and close the laptop. Then he leaned back in his chair, pressed his fingers together, and whispered into the silence, "Please, just let it work." That was the first time I saw him look small. Really small, not weak, just human. And for a moment, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt like a daughter. A tired, hollow daughter who still wanted him to turn around and say, "You did it. I see you. I always have." But he didn't. He just poured himself a drink and turned off the lamp. By morning, Ava was gone, flown back to New York for bridal fittings and brunches. Dad had a golf meeting. I stayed behind, making small talk with the housekeeper and pretending I wasn't pacing. When my car arrived, I gave the foyer one last look. The marble tiles we used to race matchbox cars across. The chandelier I hit my head on when I jumped off the banister at age 7. The wall where Ava's photos hang in glossy frames. Mine aren't there. They never were. I settled into the back seat and opened my phone. The document was ready. The final asset transfer would be triggered within the hour. My name, my real name, would be revealed. The company he built in his name was now under mine. Not a shell. Not a trick. not a hostile takeover. A quiet acquisition. Piece by piece. I bought the house he forgot I grew up in. With every ignored phone call, every birthday missed, every not now. Elise and let's focus on Ava. I made him rich again, without him ever knowing it was me writing the checks. And now, I was done waiting for applause. The first call came in as we hit the freeway. It was from his assistant. The second, a frantic text. The third, a direct call. From him. I let it ring. Once. Twice. Then I watched it go to voicemail. It buzzed again, seconds later. Elise. Hey, just got some unexpected news from the board. There's a name here. Look, can we talk? When are you back in the city? This must be a misunderstanding. I didn't respond, because it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the clearest thing I'd ever done in my life. He didn't recognize the name because he never cared to learn it. Not really. I wasn't the daughter who brought him pride, just the one who brought him profit. And now, finally, ownership. And still, I wasn't angry, just resolved. Because the truth doesn't need volume, it just needs space. And tomorrow, I'll walk into that boardroom, not to confront him, not to humiliate him, but to sit quietly at the head of the table he thought he built alone, and watch him realize I was never standing behind Ava. I was beside him the whole time. He just never turned his head to look. The lobby of Langford Holdings smelled like polished wood and cold ambition. I hadn't set foot in this building in nearly 5 years, and yet everything looked exactly the same. Down to the receptionist's forced smile and the scent of old cologne clinging to the elevator walls. It used to intimidate me, this place. When I was younger and still hoping to earn his approval, I'd visit once or twice a year. I'd bring reports, plans, suggestions. I'd dress the part, speak the part, think the part. And he'd nod, maybe skim a few pages, then say something like, Elise, you've got a good head, but let's not get too ahead of ourselves. All right, this isn't the kind of business you learn from textbooks. And yet, I did. I learned from textbooks, and experience, and failure, from late nights and lean months, from consulting with companies that started in garages and now sit on Forbes lists. I built a name that meant something, just not to him, until now. The elevator chimed as it reached the top floor. The doors opened into a hallway lined with abstract paintings and glass doors that reflected too much light. The conference room was at the end, all sleek steel and boardroom hush. Through the frosted panelling, I could already see him. My father, pacing. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically. He was still tall, still broad-shouldered, still dressed in his favourite dark grey suit with a navy tie. But something in his posture had shifted. The weight of confusion, maybe, or fear. He wasn't alone. The board was already seated. 4 men, 1 woman. They glanced up as I entered, unsure whether to stand or stay still. I offered a polite nod, then moved to the chair at the head of the table. He didn't notice at first. Elise, he said, startled. What are you doing here? His voice cracked on the last word. I sat down slowly, opened my folder, and laid out the transfer documents with deliberate care. This meeting was requested to finalise the transition in leadership. I said calmly, my voice steady. You've seen the paperwork, you've seen the votes. You know what this is. He blinked. No, I don't. I don't know what this is. Why is your name on these documents? I looked him in the eye then. For the first time in a long time, I let him see all of it. The hurt, the restraint, the fire I'd kept buried for years, because I bought it. I said, quietly, over time, through a trust I set up after you rejected my proposal, the one that could have saved the company 5 years ago. But you wouldn't even read it. He looked stunned. You bought Langford. Not just Langford, I replied, still calm. I bought the subsidiaries, the trademarks, the patents. I bought the vendors you outsourced to and the data you neglected. I bought the skeletons you tried to hide in bad filings. A silence fell over the room like a cold fog. You could hear a pin drop or a heartbreak. He sat down slowly, hands gripping the armrests. Why, I tilted my head. Why not? He shook his head. No, Elise, come on. We're family. This is your legacy too. Why wouldn't you come to me? Why wouldn't you? I said, cutting him off. So many times. You just never listened. I was always just the quiet one. The background one. The fallback plan. The daughter who didn't need attention because she had discipline. You didn't see me. Not then. Not ever. His mouth opened, then closed again. Like he wanted to say something that could fix everything, but knew there was nothing left that could. I didn't do this to hurt you. I continued, more softly now. I did it to save what we both built. Even if only one of us believed I helped build it. The woman on the board, Sandra, leaned forward. So, you're assuming full executive control. I nodded. Effective immediately. My legal team will walk through the transition plan. No one here is losing their job. No restructuring. But this company deserves new direction. Real direction. Not nostalgia and denial. My father was staring at the table now, motionless. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because somewhere deep inside me, past the wounds, past the silence, past the long corridor of years where I waited for him to just look at me, there was still that little girl who believed he might clap for her someday. But I'm not her anymore. I stood, closed my folder and looked around the room. Thank you all for being here. I'll have my assistant coordinate next week's agenda. And then I walked out. No dramatic exit, no slam of doors, no smug expression. Just a quiet walk down the hallway of a building I now owned. As the elevator descended, I closed my eyes and exhaled. It was done. He knew. He saw me. Not as Ava's sister, not as the background, not as a whisper behind the throne, but as the one who built the new kingdom. And I didn't need him to applaud, because this time I was already standing at the centre of the stage. That night, I didn't go home. I didn't go to the condo overlooking the skyline or to the sleek, minimalist office where my assistant usually leaves herbal tea and a folder of next day meetings. I drove instead, no GPS, no destination, just through the city's outskirts, past neighbourhoods that had once shaped me, ignored me, raised me in their silence. I ended up parked outside my old high school. The brick building looked smaller now, like most things from childhood, but the feelings it stirred, they were enormous. I sat in the car, engine off, heat humming. I could still see the auditorium through the fencing. The place where Ava once performed in Greece, and the entire town showed up, cheering as she danced in a pink wig and blew kisses from the stage. She got flowers, a standing ovation, a full page spread in the school newsletter. That same night, I'd received an early admission letter from Yale. I'd told my dad after dinner, practically vibrating with excitement, a folded printout clenched in my hand. He said, "That's nice," without looking up from his wine. Then asked if I'd taken a picture of Ava's performance for her Instagram. That was the first time I felt it. The shift. The subtle, sinking weight of knowing your milestones would always come second to someone else's moments. I was 16. Now I'm 32. And I finally stopped waiting for someone to clap. Still, something inside me ached. Not regret. Not even sadness. Just the quiet sting of a wound I'd carried so long it had become part of me. Like scar tissue that tightens under sudden cold. My phone buzzed. Another message from him. Please, Elise, we need to talk. Not as executives, as father and daughters. I didn't reply. Not yet. Because I didn't know if I believed it. If he really wanted to talk as my father, or if he just didn't know what to do now that I had the power. So I drove home, parked, showered, sat in silence. Then I opened a drawer and pulled out a dusty, half-warped box. Inside were letters I'd never sent, emails drafted but deleted, photos of me and Ava as children, a few worn report cards, one hand-drawn picture of our family, stick figures labelled Dad, Mum, me, and Ava, with one detail I'd forgotten until now. In my childlike scrawl, I'd written under mine, I work hard. Even then, I'd known that work would be my currency, that I'd never be the sparkly one, the one who dazzled in sunlight, but I could be useful. I could be strong. I could make myself undeniable. Another message came through, from Ava this time. Is it true? Did you really buy the company? No punctuation, no emojis, not even a greeting. I typed a response, deleted it, then typed another. Yes. A minute passed. 2. Then, why wouldn't you tell me? I stared at the screen. My hands tightened. Tell her. When had she ever listened? When had she ever asked? She lived in a world where things were handed to her. Beauty, affection, opportunity. I lived in a world where everything had to be proven, documented, signed in triplicate. Still, part of me wanted to explain. So I typed again because you wouldn't have believed me. Just like he didn't. No reply. I sat back, exhaling. A single tear slid down my cheek, uninvited. Not from pain, not even from anger, but because I suddenly realised I didn't want her to hate me. And that terrified me more than anything. I hadn't done this to hurt her. I'd done it for me, and for years, that had felt righteous. Now, it just felt lonely. I looked around the room, my sleek apartment, my silent phone, and I thought, this is what winning looks like. But I knew better. This wasn't the end. This was the fracture. The start of a new silence, not built from neglect, but from decisions I made. My phone buzzed again. A photo. It was of me and Ava, aged 7 and 9, standing in front of the house in matching dresses. She had her arm wrapped around me. I was smiling at the camera. She was smiling at me. Underneath it, one line, I wish I'd seen you better. And that undid something in me. Because even if it came late, it was honest. And it meant she had started to understand what I had spent decades trying not to say out loud, that I had been here the whole time, working hard, loving them in silence, waiting to be seen, not applauded, not envied, just seen. I typed, "It's not too late." Sent. Then I turned off my phone. And for the first time in years, I let myself fall asleep not as a sister, not as a daughter, not as an executive, but as a woman who had finally stopped asking for permission to matter. The next morning, the city felt different, not brighter, not louder, but sharper, like I could finally see the seams behind the curtain, the places where people stitch together illusions to hold their lives upright. I took the train to a part of town I hadn't visited in years, a quiet neighbourhood filled with modest homes, cracked sidewalks, and family-owned bakeries where people still smiled without asking what you did for a living. My mother used to bring me here, on Saturdays, just the two of us, before Ava's dance competitions took over every weekend, before Mum got sick, before she disappeared from our lives so gently that it felt like forgetting. There's a small cemetery on the hill above the church. Simple, peaceful, almost invisible unless you're looking for it. I found her plot easily. It's the only place I never lose my way to. Her name is carved into a stone that's weathered more than it should have been, Claire Langford, and beneath it, in smaller font, she loved quietly, and that was enough. I sat down in the grass, smoothing out my coat beneath me. The wind stirred gently, lifting the scent of earth and memory. "Hey, Mum," I whispered. It felt strange, talking aloud after all this time. I hadn't visited in over a year, not because I didn't think of her, I did, often, but because every time I came, I felt that old lump in my throat, that weight of having too much to say and nowhere for it to go. "I did it," I said softly. "I bought the company. His company." A pause. "Your company too, in a way." Even if he never said it. The wind picked up a little, brushing my hair across my cheek. I wish you'd been there, at the boardroom, to see his face when he realised. He didn't yell. He didn't deny it. He just went quiet. Like something in him broke, my voice caught. I thought it would feel better. Another silence. I wanted him to finally see me, not just as the daughter who did everything right, but the daughter he never truly understood. I thought that once he saw my name, once he realised it was me, I'd feel something, whole, vindicated. I looked down at my hands, clasped tightly in my lap, but all I felt was tired. Birds chirped somewhere behind me. Church bells echoed faintly from below. "I think I became you more than I thought I would," I said with a faint smile. "You loved quietly. You endured silently. You never asked for anything, and yet you held everything together." I leaned forward, touching the edge of the stone with my fingertips. "I wish I had asked you how you did it, how you managed to stay soft when the world didn't give you credit for anything you carried. I'm still learning." And then, without meaning to, I said the thing I hadn't said in 17 years. "I miss you." It came out small, crooked, but honest. I miss your hands, your voice. I miss how you made space for me even when Dad forgot I was in the room. A tear rolled down my cheek. I let it. "I think you'd be proud of me. Not for the money, not for the acquisition, but because I didn't let the silence become me." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded photo, the same one Ava had sent me. Us in our little dresses, arms linked, standing beneath the sun. I placed it at the base of the headstone, weighed it down with a small flat stone. She sees me now too. I said, "I think we're going to be okay." I stood slowly, brushing off my coat, and looked at the grave one last time. "I wish you'd stayed longer, but I know you're still here." Somehow, as I walked away, I didn't feel lighter, I didn't feel healed, but I felt settled, like a puzzle piece finally clicked into place, not because the image was perfect, but because it was finally mine. By the time I got home, I had missed 4 calls, 1 from my father, 3 from Ava. I didn't call Dad back, but I did listen to his voicemail. Elise. I don't know what to say. I don't even know where to begin. I'm not good at this. I wasn't good at being a father to you. That much is clear now. But I'm proud. I am. Even if I never said it when it mattered most. He paused. If you want nothing to do with me, I'll understand. But I hope we can start something. Even if it's late. I replayed it twice. Then deleted it. Not out of cruelty, but because I didn't need to hear it again. I already knew. I had become the woman my mother raised, in silence, in strength, in shadows, and no one could take that from me now. I didn't respond to my father's voicemail, not because I wanted to punish him, not even because I didn't believe he meant it, but because sometimes silence says more than closure ever can. And I had spent my whole life trying to fill silence with answers that were never coming. So instead of replying, I returned to work. My kind of work, not glamorous, not loud, no ribbon cuttings, no spotlight interviews, just the real gritty kind of rebuilding, the kind that begins behind closed doors, with hard conversations and hard numbers. The Monday after the takeover, I sat in the corner office that used to be his, stripped bare now of its grandiosity. I'd had the mahogany desk replaced with a simpler one, the walls repainted, the bookshelf restocked, this time with titles worth finishing. I didn't change it out of spite. I changed it because I needed the room to feel like mine. And if I left even one trace of his fingerprints on this place, I knew I'd start to shrink again. The first few days were quiet, nervous glances from senior staff, awkward congratulations from people who hadn't yet decided if they resented me or respected me. Some, I'm sure, were waiting for me to fail, but I couldn't, because this company, the one he'd always called his legacy, was now my future, and I wasn't building it for applause anymore. I was building it for the girl who sat in the back row of every family dinner, who cleared dishes while Ava told stories, for the girl who got straight A's and was told to be humble, for the woman who no one ever saw coming until it was too late, and for every woman like her. One afternoon, I found myself walking down the hallway toward the archives. It was a part of the building I'd never had access to before, locked behind codes and clearance I now possessed. Inside, it smelled of old files and stale ambition, rows of cabinets, stacks of forgotten contracts, a whole graveyard of deals my father had once made and then buried when they didn't serve his narrative. I flipped through one of the drawers labelled 1999-2003, and there, tucked between outdated financial reports and irrelevant vendor forms, I found it, a project proposal, written in my mother's handwriting. It was dated 3 years before she died, addressed to the board, a pitch for a women-led product division focused on sustainable textiles, 2 decades before the market caught on. She had outlined a brilliant strategy, detailed, bold, ahead of its time, and at the bottom, in a different handwriting, his, a note scrawled in red ink. Too risky. Claire should focus on community outreach instead. I stared at the page for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because, for the first time, I realised I wasn't just correcting my erasure, I was correcting hers too. I took the folder, walked it back upstairs, and that evening I called my creative director into the office. We're launching a new division. I said, I want a team made entirely of women and queer leads, focused on sustainable design. Give them the autonomy to build it from scratch. She blinked. What should we call it? I didn't hesitate. Claire Division. She smiled. That's beautiful. Who's Claire? My mother, I said quietly. She had the idea first. I didn't tell her the rest. that it had been buried, that it was nearly forgotten, that it was written in pen and dismissed in seconds by the man who claimed to love her most. It didn't matter, because now it would live, because she would live, not in flowers, not in framed photos, but in action, in innovation, in a place where her voice would finally shape something real. As I sat back in my chair, I thought of something Ava said once, back when we were kids. We had been playing on the swing set, and I'd built a mini obstacle course in the yard, complete with ropes and balance beams made from broomsticks. I'd asked her to try it. She looked at it, shrugged, and said, "You always make things harder than they need to be." Maybe she was right. Or maybe I just knew from the beginning that if I was ever going to make anything of myself, I'd have to build my own course. And now I was building courses for others too. The phone buzzed on my desk. A text from Ava. "You free for lunch this week?" I stared at it. No pressure, no guilt, just an invitation. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a door. I typed, "Yes, Thursday," and sent it before I could overthink it. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this. I wasn't chasing recognition anymore. I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I had chosen myself, and I was finally learning what peace felt like. Thursday came faster than I expected. I arrived 5 minutes early, old habit, and chose a corner table tucked beneath a skylight. The restaurant was one of Ava's favourites, a converted greenhouse turned bistro with floor-to-ceiling vines and those overpriced salads that look like a Monet painting. She was late. Also, a habit. I sipped my water and glanced around. Couples murmured over artisan coffee. A mother fed her toddler bits of croissant. Laughter trickled in from the back patio. It was all very curated, very delicate, like Ava herself. When she finally walked in, heads turned. They always did. She wore soft cream linen, her hair in an effortless twist, sunglasses perched atop her head. And when she spotted me, her smile came cautiously, not forced, but uncertain, like someone walking on a frozen lake, testing for cracks. "Elise," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look really good." I nodded once. "You too." Silence stretched between us like a tight thread. For once, she didn't reach for her phone, didn't fill the air with stories or laughter or strategically humble-bragged chaos. She just looked at me, studied me, and I let her. The waiter came and went, taking our orders. A kale and citrus salad for her, blackened cod for me. When we were alone again, she finally spoke. "So," she said quietly, "it's real, all of it. You actually own the company." I nodded. She exhaled slowly, shaking her head in disbelief. I don't know whether to be proud or terrified. I raised an eyebrow. "Why terrified?" "Because," she said, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, "you did something I couldn't even imagine doing. All these years, I thought I knew you, and now I'm sitting across from someone who's powerful." The word hung in the air like a confession. "I was always powerful," I replied. "You just didn't see it." She didn't flinch. "I know. That's what scares me." I blinked. It was the first time I'd ever heard her say that my strength unsettled her, that my quietness wasn't emptiness, but a depth she never bothered to dive into. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I said, "Not to you, not even to him." Then why, she asked, not accusingly, just softly, like she genuinely wanted to know. I stared at the condensation sliding down my glass, because I was tired of waiting to be seen. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. Her voice was quieter now, almost childlike. Do you remember that night? When I got the role in Greece and you got into Yale, I didn't even know until 2 days later. You never said anything. You were busy. I said, not bitter, just factual. But I should have known. I should have asked. And I didn't. A pause. Then she looked down at her lap and whispered, I think I liked being the star because it meant I didn't have to look too closely at what anyone else needed. I said nothing. Because what do you say to that? She looked up again, her eyes shining. Dad, he shaped a lot of that. He made me feel like I had to shine to matter, and he made you feel like you had to be useful. We sat with that truth between us for a long moment. It was ugly. It was honest. And it wasn't just about blame. It was about grief. Do you hate me? She asked quietly. No, I said, almost surprised at how quickly the answer came. I never hated you. I just stopped expecting you to see me. She nodded again, swallowing hard. I see you now. Our food arrived. We barely touched it. Instead, we sat there, 2 women who had once shared a bedroom and now shared a lineage of silence, trying to relearn the language of sisterhood. She reached across the table and gently took my hand. I'm sorry, she said. I nodded. Me too. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a beginning. As we left the restaurant, she hugged me. Not tightly. Not theatrically. Just long enough for me to feel the beat of her heart. Quick and real. And as she pulled away, she whispered, You were never in my shadow. Elise, I think I was just afraid of standing in yours. That night, I stood on the balcony of my apartment and let the city breathe beneath me. Cars hummed, lights flickered, life pulsed in 1,000 windows. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in it. Not because someone had come to save me, but because someone finally chose to see me, not as a backup, not as a support beam, but as a woman standing on her own 2 feet, casting her own light. The weeks that followed felt like a quiet thaw. Nothing dramatic, no grand reconciliations, no Instagram-worthy family brunches or public apologies. But things began to move, slowly, tentatively, in a different direction. Ava started texting more, not just emoji-laced updates or polished snapshots of her curated life, but real things. Frustrations at work, a sleepless night, a photo of our childhood cat she found buried in one of Mum's old boxes. And me, I answered. Not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. It felt like something fragile was starting to mend, a thread that had never fully snapped, just frayed so thin we'd both forgotten how much we missed the feeling of it pulling taut between us. My father, on the other hand, remained quiet, which, in a way, felt familiar, expected, almost safe, until one morning, a letter arrived. A real letter. Handwritten, on crisp, thick stationery I recognised instantly. His office set, engraved with the Langford crest in gold. No envelope, just the folded pages, hand-delivered by a private courier. No signature on the outside, no message, just my name in his sharp, unmistakable handwriting. I unfolded it slowly, the paper crackling as I did. Elise. I wanted to call. I didn't. I wanted to explain. I can't. What I did or didn't do for you is something I'll carry with me until I take my last breath. You were never invisible to me. That's the hardest part. I saw you, working late, succeeding quietly, doing everything right. And I let myself believe that meant you didn't need more. that you didn't need me, but you did, and I wasn't there. I don't know how to fix that. I don't even know if it's fixable. But I need you to know this. I am proud of you, not just because of what you built, but because of how you did it, with integrity and patience and grace I never gave you. You didn't just buy the company. You saved it. You saved me. Whether you believe that or not. If there's a way forward, any way, I'm here. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times. Once as the little girl who used to wait on the stairs, listening to whether his voice would mention her name. Once as the woman who now ran the empire he believed would outlive him. And once, just once, as myself. No roles, no filters. I didn't cry. I didn't tear it up. I folded it neatly and slid it into the top drawer of my desk, between a signed contract and a photo of my mother. Because forgiveness isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a decision not to keep bleeding. That afternoon, I visited the Clare division, still under construction, but already buzzing with potential. The floor was filled with women, young, focused, excited, engineers, designers, analysts, dreamers. One of them, a girl with braids and thick glasses, saw me walking by and paused. "Miss Langford," she called out. I turned. "Yes." She hesitated, then grinned. "Thank you. For this? No one ever gives us space like this." I smile, and for once, it didn't feel like armour. "You don't need anyone to give it to you." I said, "You just need someone to stop standing in the way." And I meant it, because that's what power should be. Not control, not legacy, but the removal of barriers, so others can rise too. Later that evening, I found myself on a rooftop. The same one I used to sneak onto in college when the world felt too heavy. Only now, I wasn't running. I was reflecting. The sky was fading to lavender, the city exhaling around me. I leaned on the railing and closed my eyes. I had spent so long trying to be enough to be noticed, enough to be loved, enough to matter. But the truth was simpler, quieter. I had always been enough. It just took time, and a storm, to remember that. Behind me, the elevator doors chimed. Footsteps approached. And then a voice, soft and uncertain. "Elise," I turned. Ava stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You said this place calms you," she said with a smile. "Figured maybe you'd be up here." She handed me a cup, then leaned on the railing beside me. We stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder. No rush, no show. Just 2 women, no longer in each other's shadows, and for the first time in our lives, standing in the same light. I didn't realise how tense my body had been until it began to loosen, little by little, in the days that followed. Like every muscle had been clenched for years without me noticing. And now, breath by breath, I was learning how to exhale again. And with that exhale came space. Space for new things, new habits, new boundaries, new beginnings. I started walking to work instead of taking a car. Just 20 minutes through the city, headphones off, no distractions. I watched the world more. Faces, sunlight through scaffolding, little kids dragging oversized backpacks and arguing with their parents about cereal. For once, I wasn't moving toward a goal. I was just moving, and that felt revolutionary. One morning, I walked past a storefront I'd never noticed before. A dusty little gallery tucked between a bank and a shoe repair shop, with a hand-lettered sign that read "Unfinished Stories." Portraits of the nearly forgotten. Something about it stopped me. Maybe it was the word unfinished. Maybe it was how closely that word once fit me. I stepped inside. The space smelled like ink and memory. There were only 12 paintings, all small, all soft. Faces of people who had lived ordinary, quiet lives. A factory worker, a midwife, a girl who died too young, a woman who taught piano for 40 years and was never once in a newspaper. Each portrait had a name, a brief bio, and one line at the bottom. They were here. I don't know why, but I cried. Not loud, not messy, just a few tears, hot and necessary, because that was it. Wasn't it what I had always wanted? Not a throne, not a headline, just proof that I was here, that I existed, that I mattered. Later that night, I found myself digging through an old storage box in my closet, one I hadn't opened since my 20s. Inside was a worn journal, the kind with a fake leather cover and those old ribbon bookmarks that fray like hair. I flipped through the pages. My handwriting, stiff and earnest. The entries started at age 13. Ava got roses again. I got nothing. But I finished my science project 2 days early. And Ms. Greer said it was the best one she's seen. I wish someone had told Dad. Later pages were sharper. Aged. He called me his second brain today. Not his second daughter. His second brain. Like I'm just a tool. A calculator in heels. And then, further still. Maybe I was born to be overlooked. Maybe some of us are just meant to support, to hold, to stand in the wings. I closed the journal, and I whispered to the girl who wrote those words. You were wrong, but you didn't know better. You were surviving. I placed the journal back in the box and slid it under my bed, not because I wanted to hide it, but because it no longer defined me. It was a record, not a prophecy. At the office the next morning, I called an all-hands meeting. People looked nervous. Meetings from the top usually meant cuts, restructures, changes, but I smiled and said something that surprised even me. We're going to slow down. Murmurs, raised eyebrows. Not permanently, but for this next month, we're reducing non-essential meetings. No late-night emails. No weekend calls. We're going to work hard, but we're going to breathe. Because burnout doesn't build legacies. People do. And just like that, the tone shifted. We weren't just building a company anymore. We were building a culture. Later, I got a message from one of our engineers. I haven't seen my daughter's bedtime in a year. Tonight, I will... Thank you. That one stayed with me. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Sometimes justice isn't in the downfall of those who wronged you. It's in the rise of those who needed you to survive first. That night, I walked to the edge of the river, sat on the bench Mum used to take me to, listened to the wind across the water, thought about how much had changed and how much hadn't. My phone buzz, a new message from Dad, just 4 words. Dinner, no business, please. I stared at it for a long time, then typed 2 words back. Next week. I didn't owe him redemption, but maybe I owed myself peace, because I was tired of carrying a war that no longer needed a soldier. The restaurant he chose was old school. Dark wood, dim lighting, waiters in pressed white shirts. A place for deals, for old money, for men who called waitresses darling and sipped whiskey like it made them wiser. He was already there when I arrived, sitting stiffly at a corner table, hands folded, not touching his drink. For a moment, I just stood in the doorway and watched him. This man, my father, who once felt so large, a figure who defined rooms, decisions, outcomes, who raised me with rules instead of praise, with structure instead of softness. Now he looked smaller, not shrunken, exactly, but like a monument that had been hollowed out by time. When he saw me, he stood, fumbled with his napkin. "Elise, hi," I said. We sat, exchanged pleasantries, ordered, the usual scripts, then silence. He cleared his throat. "You look good. Happy." "I'm calmer," I said, not sure if that counts as happy. He gave a short, tight laugh. "It does. It does now." I stirred my water, watching the lemon slice spin slowly in the glass. I waited. I wasn't going to save him from the hard part. "I want to say thank you," he finally said, "for what you did, for saving the company." I nodded. "And I want to apologise," he added, more slowly, for not being better." There it was, the line I dreamt of for years, the one I used to imagine in the mirror, whispering it to myself just to hear the syllables. But hearing it out loud, it didn't explode anything inside me. It didn't break the dam. It just settled. "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. "But you don't owe me a performance. If you're here to check a box, I don't need it." He shook his head. "No, this isn't for closure. It's for clarity." He looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I saw regret. Not self-pity, not guilt as performance, just a tired man who'd finally realised what his legacy was missing. "I didn't know how to father you," he said. "You didn't need my protection. You were smart, capable. I didn't know what you needed from me, so I defaulted to distance. And Ava needed everything loud. I thought I was balancing, but I was neglecting." I breathed in slowly, let the words sink. "I didn't need you to fix things," I said. "I just needed you to see them, to see me, even when I was easy, even when I wasn't in crisis." He nodded. "I see that now." I believed him. Not completely, but enough. "You were right about one thing," I added, "about legacy." His eyes lifted, cautious. "It's not just about what you build, it's about who you build it with, who you lift while you're building." He smiled. Small, real. "That's why it's in better hands now." We didn't talk business after that. We talked about Mom, about her hands in the garden, her laugh when she forgot where she placed her keys, how she used to sing softly when doing dishes, not for show, just for herself. "She would have been proud of you," he said. "She already was." I replied. The check came. He reached for it. I didn't stop him. Small things still mattered. Outside, the street was quiet, the kind of city silence that hums with the lives of 1,000 strangers going home. He walked me to my car, just like he used to after recitals, when he'd say, "Good job," without really remembering what I played. But this time, he stopped. "Can I ask one more thing?" I waited. "Will you ever forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. I thought about the years of silence, the promotions he never noticed, the tears shed behind office doors, the pride swallowed every time Ava was called the golden one. Then I thought of the letter, the apology, the man in front of me, not perfect, not redeemed, but present. "I don't know," I said, "but I'm trying." He nodded, didn't push, just placed his hand lightly on my shoulder, then walked away. And that was enough. Forgiveness doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it's a gentle breeze that reminds you you can breathe again. I sat in my car for a while, engine off, letting the night settle around me. Then I drove home, not faster, not slower, just steady. Because some roads aren't about where you're going. They're about how far you've already come. I didn't tell anyone about the dinner. Not Ava. Not my team. Not even the journal I still wrote in sometimes. The one I'd started keeping again. Not because I needed to vent, but because I finally had something worth recording. The dinner wasn't about broadcasting closure. It was just a moment. A quiet one. The kind you fold up and keep in your coat pocket like a receipt for something you didn't know you'd paid for until years later. That week, work felt different. Easier, somehow. Not because the pressure was gone. It never really is. But because I was no longer performing for invisible judges. We were onboarding 2 new interns, both women. One of them, Casey, was barely 22, nervous and brilliant and already apologising for taking up space. I pulled her aside after our morning check-in. "Casey," I said gently, "do you know you don't have to shrink to be smart?" She looked stunned. "I'm sorry. There's no quota on presence," I continued. "You don't need to be quiet to be respected. You don't need to be the smallest voice in the room to earn your place in it." She stared at me like I'd just handed her something fragile and heavy. And maybe I had. I saw myself in her. That early version, sharp, capable, but always curling inward, hoping that excellence would eventually equal visibility. She nodded slowly, eyes a little watery. "Thank you. I needed that." I smiled. We all did. No one ever told me that at your age. So now I tell others. Because that's how cycles change. Not with revolutions, but with soft, steady declarations. Later that day, Ava dropped by my office. She didn't knock. Just popped her head in and said, "Lunch?" I grinned. "You're really committing to this sister thing." She smirked. Too late to back out now. We went to a hole-in-the-wall ramen place 2 blocks away, our old favourite before everything got complicated. The kind of place with sticky tables and handwritten menus and the best broth in the city. We didn't talk business. We didn't talk family. We just talked. About movies. About a podcast she loved. About the absurdity of wedding planning. About how she wasn't sure she still wanted a big wedding at all. How something about it felt performative now. "I don't want to start a marriage in a room full of people I'm trying to impress," she said, stirring her noodles. "I want to start it in truth." I nodded. "That's harder." "Yeah," she said, "but maybe that's why it matters more." I could have cried. Not because she said something profound, but because she said something real. Something that wasn't about sparkle or spectacle. Afterward, we walked back slowly. The air had that warm heaviness of late spring. Not hot, but pressing. Like the season itself was asking you to pause. We stopped at a crosswalk, and she looked at me and said, "You're better at this than I am. At what being a grown-up." She laughed. "Facing things. Building things that last. Not just things that look good." I looked at her, not with pride, but with a strange softness I hadn't known I could still feel for her. "You've always been good at being seen," I said. "Now you're learning how to see. That's not nothing." She didn't answer, just reached over and took my hand, and we crossed the street together. That evening, I found a box outside my apartment door. No note. Just brown paper wrapping and a shipping label from some small town in Oregon. Inside was a framed print of one of the portraits I saw in the gallery, the one of the piano teacher, the one with the caption, "She was here." Underneath it, in Ava's handwriting, "So are you?" I stared at it for a long time. Then I hung it on the wall across from my desk, where I'd see it every day, because that's all I ever wanted. Not a crown. Not a throne. just proof that I was here, that I mattered, that someone knew. Now they did. And more importantly, now I did. The next board meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday. A formality, really. Quarterly updates, future planning, a few budget votes. It should have been routine. It was routine. But it felt different now. Not because of who was sitting around the table, but because of who I had become in that room. The last time I stood at the head of that table, I was carrying decades of unspoken hurt like armour, determined to prove something, even if I couldn't name what. Now, I walked in not with fire, but with clarity. No tight jaw, no defensive posture, just presence. The same men who once dismissed me now watched closely when I spoke. Not because I demanded it, but because they'd learned I no longer waited for permission to take up space. Sandra, the only other woman on the board, gave me a small nod as I sat down. A silent signal. We see you. After the meeting. I lingered in the hallway, sipping the burnt coffee from the break room. It used to feel symbolic. How even the coffee here tasted tired, like everything in this building had stopped evolving a decade ago. But now I was rebuilding. And not just the company. Ms. Langford. A voice behind me. New. Young. Nervous. I turned. A junior analyst, no older than 24, holding a stack of binders like a shield. Sorry, she stammered. I just wanted to say thank you for the mentorship program. I wouldn't be here without it. I smiled. What's your name, Danielle? Well, Danielle, I'm glad you're here, and I'm not just saying that. She blinked. It's just no one in power ever talks to us like we matter. I leaned against the wall. I used to feel that way, too. It's why I make sure I do now. She looked like she might cry. Then laughed instead, awkward and grateful, and hurried off with her stack of binders. Cheeks flushed. And I stood there for a moment, feeling something bloom in the quiet. It wasn't pride. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was something closer to peace, to alignment. I was becoming the woman I once needed. And that meant more than any board vote ever could. That weekend, Ava invited me to a small gathering. Just close friends, she said. Casual. She promised. I went. Not out of obligation. Out of curiosity. The house was filled with candles, mismatched chairs, and soft music. People laughed. Shoes were kicked off at the door. It felt lived in, imperfect, warm. Ava floated through the room like always, but something in her had changed. She wasn't performing. She was participating. When she introduced me, she didn't say, "This is my sister, Elise. She just bought our dad's company." She said, "This is Elise. She's one of the smartest women I know." And that mattered. I stayed longer than I planned, talked with strangers, laughed without listening for the echo, let myself be seen without bracing for comparison. At one point, Ava found me sitting on the back steps, barefoot, sipping from a chipped wine glass. She sat beside me, pulled her knees to her chest. "I used to think you hated me," she said, eyes fixed on the stars above the fence line. "I didn't," I said. "I just gave up trying to explain myself to someone who wasn't listening." She nodded. "I hear you now." I believed her. "Do you ever wish it had gone differently?" she asked after a while. "All of it?" I thought for a long time before answering. "No," I said, because if it had, maybe I wouldn't have become this version of myself. She looked at me, her expression soft. "I like this version of you." I smiled. "I do too." We sat in silence. Two sisters, finally breathing in sync. not trying to be each other's mirror, not trapped in an invisible tug-of-war for attention, just still. I walked home that night, shoes in hand, wind against my face, and for the first time, I felt like I had finally arrived, not at success, not at revenge, but at myself. A few days later, I returned to the house I grew up in, the house he built, the one I used to walk through like a ghost, careful not to disturb anything, careful not to want too much. It wasn't a special occasion, no party, no dinner. He had simply asked, in a text that was surprisingly gentle, "Would you come by this weekend, just to talk?" So I did. The lawn was freshly trimmed. The ivy still climbed the brick in the exact same pattern. Even the chime at the front door hadn't changed, that slow, echoing tone that used to make my stomach tighten. He opened the door with a look I couldn't quite name, part hope, part fear, part apology. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. I walked in and felt the air shift immediately. The scent was the same. Old leather, floor polish, faint citrus. But something was different, lighter. The photo wall was gone. The one filled with Ava, every stage performance, every birthday, every perfectly captured smile. In its place was a single, large frame, a photo of all four of us. Dad, Mum, Ava, me. It was from the one summer we took a trip together, not a fancy one, just a rental cabin near a lake. I was 11. Ava was 9. We were both wet from swimming, wrapped in towels, cheeks flushed, hair tangled. Mum had taken the picture just before we ran off chasing dragonflies. We looked happy, not perfect, but real. He followed my gaze. It was time for something new. I nodded. "It's a good picture." We sat in the sunroom, the one Mum used to read in. He poured coffee, mine the way I like it. Finally remembering, "I've been thinking a lot about legacy," he said, stirring his cup slowly. "How much of it is what we build, and how much is what we leave behind for others to carry?" I let the words hang. I wasn't going to rescue him from his own reflection. "I made mistakes," he added, "not just as a father, as a man, as someone who thought respect was earned through control." I studied him. He wasn't rehearsing. He wasn't performing. He was reflecting. I thought if I kept things in order, if I kept things strong, everything would stay intact. I didn't understand that you were already strong, stronger than me, most days. I didn't know how to hold that. I looked at him, at the lines time had carved into his face, at the man who had once loomed so large and now sat before me as simply human. "You don't have to carry it forever," I said softly. He nodded, slowly. "Maybe not. But I do want to carry part of it with you now, if you'll let me." We talked for hours, about nothing, about everything, about Mum, about what she might have done differently and what she wouldn't have changed for the world, about Ava, about mistakes, about regret, but also about hope. When I got up to leave, he walked me to the door and pressed a small envelope into my hand. "What is it, something that belongs to you?" I opened it later, in the car. Inside was an old folded sheet of paper, yellowing at the edges. It was my mother's project proposal, the same one I'd found in the archives. But this version had something new, her signature, and his, dated the week before she died. I stared at it, stunned. He had signed it, quietly, after she passed, after it was too late. A gesture, a silent promise, a maybe too late kind of love. And now, it was mine. I held it to my chest and closed my eyes, because now I knew. Some legacies come from silence, but others are born from finally breaking it. When I got home, I placed the paper beside the framed portrait Ava had sent me. 2 truths, side by side. She was here, so am I. I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my journal, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't write about the past. I wrote about the future, about what I wanted to build, about the kind of woman I wanted to continue becoming, about the kind of woman who leaves rooms better than she found them, not louder, just more honest. And just before I closed the journal, I wrote a single line at the bottom. I forgive him. Not for him. For me. There was no final confrontation. No viral moment. No slow clap in a boardroom. No crowd of astonished onlookers realising who I truly was. Just a quiet Sunday morning. Ava and I sat on the floor of her apartment, barefoot, surrounded by old boxes we'd found in Dad's attic. Childhood things, faded birthday cards, drawings from school, wrinkled programmes from piano recitals and talent shows neither of us remembered much about. We laughed. Sometimes we cried. But mostly, we remembered. I forgot this even existed, she said, pulling out a broken hairbrush with glitter still clinging to it. We used to fight over this thing. I let you win, I said. She gave me a look. You always let me win. No, I smiled, only when it didn't matter. She didn't argue. A photo slipped from one of the boxes, me and Ava, sitting in the back seat of Dad's old station wagon, sharing a milkshake, my head on her shoulder, her mouth open mid-laugh. We couldn't have been older than 8 or 9. She picked it up, held it for a long time. We weren't always broken, she said quietly. No, I replied. We were just never shown how to be whole. That landed between us like truth always does. Not loud, just undeniable. Later, she pulled a small velvet box from the bottom of another container. Inside was Mom's necklace, the one she used to wear every day. A tiny gold bar with a barely there engraving. Hold steady. I forgot this was in here, Ava whispered. I thought it was lost. I held out my hand. She paused, then placed the necklace in my palm. You should have it, she said. Are you sure I wore it once? That was enough. You've lived it. I closed my fingers around the delicate chain and nodded. Hold steady. Mum's words. Her mantra. Her legacy. Later that week, I stood alone in the Clare Division office. Construction had finished. The glass walls were clear. The desks arranged. The logo, a minimalist C wrapped in a steady spiral, gleamed behind the reception desk. We were hosting our launch the next day. Press, investors, a new chapter. But I wanted to see it first. Alone. Before anyone else assigned it a headline. I walked the floor slowly, running my hand along the sleek tables, stopping to read the mission statement painted near the entrance. I smiled. Then I went to the far corner, where a small plaque had just been installed. I hadn't approved it. It was a surprise from my team. It read, "In honour of Elise Langford, founder, leader, quiet architect of legacy. You didn't demand attention. You earned it, and you gave it back to those who needed it most." I stood there for a while, not because I needed to memorize the words, but because I finally believed them. That evening, I hosted a small dinner, nothing extravagant. Just a few close friends, Ava and Dad. Simple food, no toasts, no speeches, just connection. Dad brought a photo album, one I'd never seen. Every page was me. my spelling bee, my college acceptance, my graduation, articles I'd written, certificates he'd kept, photos I didn't even know had been taken. I didn't show these, he said quietly, because I didn't know how to celebrate you without feeling like I was losing control. He looked up at me, but I kept them because I was proud. Every day, even when I didn't say it, I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I'd cried enough. Now, I was full. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood at my window and watched the city breathe. The lights, the movement, the stories behind every window. There was no music swelling, no dramatic ending, just peace. And that, I realised, was the real ending. Not revenge, not vindication, or just a woman, finally home in her own life. I poured a cup of tea, sat in silence, and wrote one last thing in my journal. He only posted about Ava until he learned who saved his empire, until he realised whose hands rebuilt the world beneath him. And when he saw me, really saw me, I didn't need him to post, because I had already written the story myself, in quiet lines, in hard choices, in moments no one applauded. I didn't need to be the star. I became the sky she shined in.